today I have a very special guest who is zooming in from the Philippines. We have Tina Rodriguez, who is here to talk about homeschooling in the Philippines and how it can help families. So let me tell you a little bit more about her. Tina and her husband first discovered homeschooling when their eldest was still in utero. You are such a planner. And they've been teaching their kids. They have 5 kids now at home and everywhere else ever since. They are independent, eclectic, Charlotte Mason inspired homeschoolers who use living books, Catholic curriculum, online resources, and life schooling, among others. Tina is one of the organizers of homeschooling and parenting summits in the Philippines. So welcome, Tina.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you all.
Well, we're super glad to have you too. So let's start by telling everyone how you and your husband and your family got started in homeschooling. You said it was in utero, so you were thinking about it for a while, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it was the opposite. We had never heard of homeschooling. And then we attended this conference where there was this speaker from the States. And it was a pro-life conference. And he was talking about the importance of values, raising your kids with values, and how do you do that? And then he said one of the things that you can do is to homeschool, and we're like, why? So that got us exploring it a bit, because that time my husband and I were based in East Timor. So we were missionaries for our Catholic community back then. Mm-hmm. So we discovered it then, but then we really didn't, seriously think about it, because I was still just pregnant with our first child. And then because we were based there as missionaries, we were like, when our son was growing older, we were like, so what are we going to do when he, has to go to school? The usual things that parents think about. And my parents, who were also on mission with us, mentioned, hey, one of these Catholic leaders in the Philippines, he's homeschooling his kids. And we were like, oh, so we started researching, but most of the research that I discovered back then, and this was during the time when internet was still really bad, especially there in East Timor. So the only resources I could find were about American homeschoolers. And then eventually, when we got back to the Philippines, or just a few months before we went home for good, I got in touch with local homeschooling moms who had been, homeschooling even before. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started. And we said we'd take it 1 year at a time. Mm-hmm. So when we first started becoming serious about it, our eldest was 3. And here we are. We're still here. And he's turning 14 this year. So it's been a wild ride.
So about 11 years so far. And you have 5 kids now. And so, so everything's going really well, and you really got involved with the homeschooling community, and you're helping out with the various summits and whatnot. So tell us a little bit more about homeschooling in the Philippines. Like, why are people initially doing it? Is it like you, they kind of start with for religious reasons or family value reasons, or is it the education system in the Philippines? What is drawing more and more people in the Philippines to homeschooling?
Okay, I think initially here in the Philippines, it really started with missionary families, so it was a faith-based, values-based thing. But eventually, as homeschooling grew more and more, for the lack of a better term, popular in the Philippines, people were discovering the benefits beyond the values and the faith. And, it's, and for some people, it was more practical to do it. With the traffic and all the stress, the stressful lifestyle that people were leading. Some people, and a lot of my friends, started out this way. They said, I send my kid to school. They're in school the whole day. When they get back, I still have to tutor them and teach them their lessons. It's like, why should I pay the school when I still have to be the one to teach them? Mm-hmm. So a lot of parents that I know also started out that way. Some do it for financial reasons, and then eventually they figure out that there are more benefits to it beyond the cost of cost of homeschooling. So right now there are, well, before COVID, there were lots of different reasons why people were, exploring homeschooling. One of the things also was the flexibility, I guess, because, there are a lot of traditional schools here, and, with a educational system the way that it is, that we know it, a lot of people were looking for something more, something that they could customize for their kids, and based on their learning styles and their abilities. Not everybody develops at the same time. So I guess more and more parents were also starting to become more intentional with their kids' education. And well, now because of COVID, we have been bombarded. All the homeschoolers here in the Philippines are being bombarded with questions.
Popular moms now.
Yeah. So everybody's like, almost every day, I think I get a private message from somebody about homeschooling.
Before COVID, approximately how many homeschoolers were there in your country?
Okay, so last year we had this rough number of about 15,000 homeschoolers. And now I don't know how many or how many are exploring it, because there are lots of people inquiring, curious, but not really decided yet because they don't really understand what it's about. So that's why, we're doing things like what you guys are doing, the summit, and we're doing our own local events to help people understand what it is, and, differentiate it from the distance learning or online learning that schools are going into.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, because, there have been polls in the US where it's the largest homeschooling community in the world. They have anywhere from 2.5 million to 3 million before COVID. And a lot of these newspapers are doing these surveys, and it's looking like 30, 40, maybe more percent of parents are thinking about homeschooling now. So that could really, who knows if they ever will, but that could really jump the numbers. Okay, so back to people who are looking into homeschooling in the Philippines. What are the typical misconceptions that people have about homeschooling?
Well, one of the things is that you just keep your kids locked up at home all day. So it's funny because when, the pandemic happened, and some people were like saying, oh, so you homeschoolers are used to doing this anyway, just being at home all the time. And we're like, no, that's not what we do. The world is our classroom. So that's one of the misconceptions, that the kids are at home all day. They're not socialized. It's only for rich people. That's one of the misconceptions. They're only for celebrities or athletes, special kinds of people, or kids with special needs. When my son was younger, and I was interviewed for a TV feature about homeschooling. And prior to the interview, I was asked, is something wrong with him? Is that why you decided to homeschool? So that was one of the misconceptions before. I think now it's not that common, but that was one of the misconceptions, that the homeschooling is just for kids with special needs and things like that. So I think it's basically the same misconceptions that people have in the US and
around the world.
So
what do you say? We go out all the time. We have homeschool meetups. We have field trips.
Yes.
Socialize all the time.
Yeah, we do. And we tell them, it's there are things that are known as vertical socialization, horizontal socialization, where they socialize with their peers, and then vertical, they socialize with people older or younger. So and then we tell them, what is the definition of socialization? Have you checked the dictionary what it actually means? So it's just basically trying to inform people and educate them so that they have a better understanding, because most of the time the misconceptions come about because people don't understand and they don't know better. So I guess it's our role to just educate them and share with them what we really do.
Right. Yeah. People think that socialization is basically having a bunch of kids of the same age in a room together, and then they grow up together, and you don't really mix with other people of other ages.
That's
that's not real life. It's only in the schools where that happens. So, okay. So, how can Filipino families learn more about homeschooling when they're interested in it?
Well, we always say, there are lots of homeschooling support groups coming up on Facebook, and there are long time support groups on Facebook. That's one of the places where people can go. They usually ask questions. We also have homeschooling groups. So we have the Homeschool Association of the Philippine Islands. I used to be part of the core group. So it's like this national umbrella organization that tries to help homeschoolers. We also have support groups, and our group, Educating for Life. So I'm one of 4 homeschooling moms behind this group called Educating for Life, and we hold conferences, summits like this summit that you mentioned earlier, to help educate people about homeschooling, to help educate parents so that they have a bigger picture of what homeschooling is, and then they can decide better, because we believe that it's better for us. I'm sure you also have the same opinion, that you can't just go into something blindly, right? Or decide to do this, like, okay, because of this pandemic, I'm going to homeschool. Yeah. But you don't know what you're really getting into. So that's one of the things that we want to do, we've been doing a series of Facebook Live sessions on our Facebook page also about homeschooling and parenting in general, also to help parents figure out.
There's so many different ways to do it too.
Yes, there's so many. Well, that's one of the things too that we tell parents. There's not just one way to homeschool. I mean, among the 4 of us in the group, we all do it differently. So, so we have to tell them that it's not just one like box type of thing. Now, here, this is how you homeschool, right, and this is what you should do. So, yeah.
Okay, so what kind of support do Filipino homeschooling families have right now?
Okay, so like I mentioned, we have support groups online, and well, pre-COVID, there were also offline support groups. People would meet, and they had different co-ops. So right now, compared to before, when we started out, there are a lot of ways that families can be supported, and we even have a national homeschooling day. It was declared by one of our senators here in the Philippines. We had our first one in 2017. So it was a big win in that sense that, homeschoolers were able to really celebrate the freedom to homeschool that we have right now. So the support that we are getting, from the government, especially now, that they are recognizing the homeschooling associations. The Department of Education just announced last week in an interview earlier this week, that they want to help, to seek the help of the homeschooler associations on how to train parents to be effective teachers.
Yeah. That's
so there's a lot of support. You just need to maybe also have a good filter, because some people claim that, oh, we're here to support you in homeschool, but what they're going to do is just present to you what they do in school, in conventional school. So we have to have good filters too, in a way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the government support, because Taiwan, homeschooling is legal there. In the Philippines, other places like Singapore, it's legal, but there's some hoops that you have to jump through. It's illegal in South Korea. Japan, I think it's illegal, but you don't get in trouble for doing it. I've been doing a little bit of studying about what countries in Asia is pro homeschooling versus against. So why do you think in the Philippines the government is a little bit more supportive than other governments in other countries?
Well, the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, it's in its Declaration of Principles and State Policies, it says, the rearing of the youth, I'll read it out loud, the rearing of the youth as a natural and primary right and duty of parents, which shall receive the support of the government. So the Constitution acknowledges, the primary right and duty of the parents. And it further says, the state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels and shall encourage, among others, non-formal and informal systems, as well as self-learning and independent study programs. So I had to read that out loud just to make
Yeah.
sure it
Yeah,
was,
no, that's wonderful.
was
I
correct.
wish more
Yeah,
countries in the world would have that. I'm shocked at like Germany and some other countries where it's super illegal,
yes.
because it's such a beautiful thing to do. All right, so what advice would you give to those in the Philippines who want to look into it as an educational option for their kids, especially during the pandemic? Because as we know, a lot of the schools are trying to do this distance learning thing, but it's not exactly the way real homeschoolers do it. And again, there's many different ways to do it. But
Yes.
what advice would you give to them?
Okay, first of all, I would say that you have to do your research. I mean, um, this is a big decision that you'd have to make, so don't go into it blindly. So do your research. Right now, there are lots of blogs and even vlogs about homeschooling in the Philippines compared to when we started out. Um, and then look for homeschoolers that you can actually, talk to and connect with and ask questions from. um, Hook up with these homeschooling associations and groups that can give you the support and the encouragement that you need, and really just try to get all the information that you need, and then filter and then choose what works for you. Also attend events, or Facebook live sessions or whatever that can help you see what homeschooling in the Philippines is really about. Also, I think it's also best that like the different, because when people ask, so the first thing that they ask me is like, what curriculum should I use? What books, where should I get my books? What homeschool provider should I enroll in? So I need to define that for you guys, because here in the Philippines, we have what we call homeschool providers. So these are like institutions that are partnered with a conventional school, a brick and mortar school, that provide a homeschooling program. So you enroll with them, and they give you suggested curricula, or they give you the books that you need to use, and then they're in charge of your records with the Department of Education. So there are two ways to homeschool: enroll with a provider or go independent. And independent means, basically, here in the Philippines, if you're an independent homeschooler, it means that you're not enrolled anywhere. So basically, you're not in the system. You're not in the DepEd system, Department of Education system. So that's what they need to know too. There are two different ways. And then beyond that, there are the methods of homeschooling, the philosophies. And I know that it can be like, information overload for a lot of parents. But I think it would be an injustice also not to tell them that there are different methods and philosophies, because a lot of them think that it's just school at home, learning from the textbooks, and then accomplishing worksheets, and that's not it, right? So we also need to educate them about that. So that's one of the things that they need to do, like research what are the common methods or philosophies of homeschooling. And then they're like, what's Charlotte Mason, and what's what
Right.
are unit studies, and what's unschooling, and what's interested learning. So I think it's, if they really want to seriously consider it, they also need to look into those different philosophies, because it's really possible to do. I mean, there is a growing Charlotte Mason community here in the Philippines, led by a local mom. So, and then there are unschoolers here in the Philippines who are really open about it. So, it just has to, I guess, to do with dealing with the information overload, and then just filtering again what works for your family. And I think one of the tips also is, one of my fellow homeschooling moms from Educating for Life also said that before anything else, first deal with what you're feeling about the pandemic, like what you and your family and you as a parent are facing, right? So are you actually even ready to decide about homeschooling or your kids' education? Maybe there are other more important, urgent matters that you need to attend to, like, employment. Like if you lost your job, that's a lot of stress, right? So those are the things that you have to look at, I think, because as we know, homeschooling is a lifestyle.
Mhm.
So if there is something that's affecting your life right now, and it's not just your kids' education, that's also something that you need to consider,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, a lot of people, they've either lost their jobs or they're working at home now thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
That actually makes
Yeah.
it really convenient to be able to homeschool your kids because you're home anyway,
That's right.
because I think in the past people thought, oh, you have to be a stay-at-home mom to be able to homeschool,
Mm-hmm.
but there's lots of working parents in the home. I also want to mention, I mean, a really large percentage of people in the Philippines speak English. So there's like all these other resources outside the Philippines.
That's
I mean, it's
right.
amazing that you have so much in the Philippines, very regional, but people will be able to, look at the information in the US, Australia, UK, other bigger countries that have more homeschooling resources and just
Mm-hmm.
read our stuff. And also the summit, we have over 80 videos on the summit.
Yes.
Tina's one of them. So please learn that way, because we have people talking about unschooling and Charlotte Mason and all the different ways to do it. So super. So why don't we talk about how your family personally homeschools, because you mix a lot of things. So can you explain
Yes.
that to me a little bit?
Okay, so we started out as like box curriculum homeschoolers because at that time I thought, that's how you do it. Like, okay, you follow
Most
the
people start that way.
right, that's right. So you follow the lesson plan to the letter, and if you don't, you feel like a failure. And then, you use workbooks and textbooks. But now, because we've figured out a style that works for us, and I'm not saying our style will work for everybody, but this is what works for us. So right now, we've adopted something that I the term that I learned from, again, homeschoolers in the US, classical unschooling. So I actually read about it first on this homeschooling blog, this simplehomeschool.net. And then I read this book, The Classical Unschooler. And so it's a mixture of classical homeschooling, Charlotte Mason, and unschooling, so self-directed learning. And we do use online resources, like our kids are part of this self-directed learning platform. It's called Galileo. But they also have a book list that they read. I mean, they choose from. So it's a book list based on Charlotte Mason. What do you call this? Required or inspired books,
Mhm.
and living books, basically, and classic books.
Mhm.
So
So not
we
textbooks, like.
no, not textbooks. So we also do narration, just like Charlotte Mason, and we do a lot. We do some memory work. We do Latin when I remember to. So we do Latin, just like in classical education. So there are some. So we mix. It's a mixture of things, but right now, because they're really into the things that they're learning from Galileo, like how to set up your own business and how to create presentations, and they're doing a lot of collaborations. So I'm letting them take the lead in that, but then they also check in with me, like what they're reading and what they're doing, and then they do narration. So it's a mixture of that, and then our faith is a big part of our homeschooling. So we also have books that focus on our faith. So it's really a mixture. So somebody told me, so you're actually an eclectic homeschooler. So I said, yeah, but I prefer to call it classical unschooling because it sounds different.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of classical stuff, a lot of reading, a lot of literature, but then also the online stuff. Like, are your kids getting
Yeah.
into learning about technology at all?
Yes. They're doing 3D modeling. And then last night they asked me, can we download Blender because they want to start doing animations. And then they're also doing a lot of, Canva related stuff. Canva is this like design platform, right? So and then the tech side also is that they're doing a lot of collaboration online with other homeschoolers, and I think that's so cool because it's like preparing them for the future. Like, if we're going to work together, you have to learn how to collaborate and use Google Slides and Google Docs and all these things, and they're doing that now, and I'm like, wow, that's
That's
cool.
awesome.
So
It's so great that they have a mix of the classic and the new modern stuff.
yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell us about, you've mentioned some of the projects. Let us know the website names for the projects. You said you have a summit coming up.
All right. So our group is called Educating for Life. So that's basically the website that you can check out. It's educatingforlife.co. So not com, it's .co. And we also have another website. It's philippinehomeschoolconvention.com. So that's where you can find our events. And we have really chosen a lot of local homeschooling experts and parenting experts, and some foreign ones too, that will hopefully help Filipino families homeschool better, or decide to homeschool, or if they opt to do distance learning, then they will learn how to support their kids better. So yeah.
That's great. So I think it's great that you're really taking charge of your kids, learning instead of just leaving it to the government schools. It's great that you're a leader in the homeschooling world in the Philippines. What do you think, if you could look in the crystal ball, what do you think the future is of homeschooling in the Philippines?
Well, even as we speak, it's really growing. I mean, there a lot of interest, even from the government. And, I've been talking to people who own schools and asking, like, how do you think we can offer homeschooling programs to our students because of the pandemic? And it's really actually overwhelming. I think it's really with the growth, with the homeschooling community also has to step up and help one another. And I really can't predict, but I really think that even globally, it's really going to grow. And even if it's just awareness and education, that would mean a lot for the homeschooling community here. Because as I said, before we organized all these events, people had a lot of misconceptions. And hopefully now things will be clearer, and that homeschooling will be, a more viable and more accepted option for many families here. And hopefully through this summit too, people will learn that, it's not just in the Philippines, it's everywhere, and you can do it in different ways. So yeah.
Exactly. Also, one question I didn't ask you yet is, do you think most of your friends' kids or your kids are planning to go to university or start a business or get some kind of online job? I mean, what do you think the kids will be doing in the future? The homeschool kids.
Okay. The homeschool kids, well, they will be changing the future. But yeah, so if you mean locally, like the homeschooling community locally, a lot of parents still foresee their kids going to college and finishing university, but my husband and I are not among those those parents. Well, we still see that university is still important if you feel that you're called to go there. But I think what's more important now is helping kids discover their passions and their interests, and nurturing that at a young age, and going through mentorship, and apprenticeship. These are the things that can help change the future. Not just because a lot of people also can't afford to go to university. And what if we shifted that focus on university to skills and trades and entrepreneurship? Maybe we could help even more families. So I think with a lot of the homeschoolers that I know, that is one of the tracks that they are looking at. But generally speaking, if you ask me, here in the Philippines, the community is still focused on I got to get my kids into a good university. And but hopefully that will change, and more people will see that there are different options, there are different ways to earn a living. And sometimes you don't even have to leave your home, right? You just have to.
Yeah. In the summit, as I mentioned, we have over 80 videos. There's going to be one, the title is How to Get a Homeschooled or Unschooled Child into University. And then there's a
Oh,
lot of other education tech companies, a lot of companies like education type companies that help kids who don't want to go to university, help them learn skills of the future. So there's so many other things out there that is
yeah.
amazing. So I encourage everyone to watch the rest of the videos. And I so appreciate you, Tina Rodriguez, for spending your time to share with us what's happening in the Philippines. I'm super glad that it's growing there. And I think in a large part, thanks to you and your team for, really supporting the people who are interested in it, a little lost, a little confused, but they're going to you for the answers. And I think that's fantastic.
Thanks so much, Liz, also for this time. I'm really so blessed to be able to share to everybody what's happening here.